On to another election now. This year marks the bloodiest election process in Mexico. Ahead of the general elections, more than 130 politicians have been murdered. Let me repeat that. 130 politicians killed, more than 13,000 Mexicans targeted and murdered as well. As Mexico's war on drugs unfolds, criminal organizations have resorted to activities such as kidnapping and extortion to keep their profits going. It is perhaps no surprise then that lawmakers who promised the public the change they crave have become targets. It has left politicians treading the fine line between appealing to the electorate and appeasing the cartels.
The narco has become a very powerful force in Mexico, and that has partly been because the government has not known how to control them. In becoming powerful, they have imposed themselves upon local leaders, forcing them to ignore their activities for fear of worsening violence.
Now, political murders weren't always commonplace in Mexico, but during 1994's electoral race, the country witnessed a new low when Luis Donaldo Colosio, a bright and dynamic hopeful for the post of president, was shot and killed by a masked gunman in Tujania, which is the country's largest border city.
Colosio said, "The Mexican people hunger and thirst for justice, but we have never truly seen it. Since Colosio's murder, many more politicians have been murdered, and the impunity that surrounds this practice has stopped any meaningful change to our political system."
It will be very difficult to break the current levels of complicity between the authorities and organized crime. It will require a strong government that also has the support of the people. The most important thing will be to pursue the politicians that have allowed this to occur. From that point, things can improve.
But the wave of murders took its real roots during former President Felipe Calderón's administration, who launched the war against drug cartels. It was then when organized crime, predominantly drug trafficking, exploded into broader criminal activities including theft, extortion, murder and state-level corruption, thereby making the country more dangerous. Let's now go straight across to Andalusia. Noel Solo, freelance multimedia journalist, joining us from Ecatepec in Mexico. Also joining us is Eric Lawson, political commentator from Mexico City. Coming to you first, Andalusia, what is the mood like at the polling center where you're stationed?
The voting poll in Ecatepec, which is a suburb of Mexico City with one of the highest crime rates actually in the country. And people are out here voting. It is early in the day, so of course no one knows who is winning, but all of the polls are saying that Andrés Manuel López Obrador of the newer Morena party, which is a leftist party in Mexico, is set to win. So what varies in the polls and the surveys is by what percentage he will win, whether it will be 5%, 10%, 20%, but all the polls are saying that he is set to win. And then some polls say that Meade, who is from the ruling PRI party, will be the follower-up, and others are saying that Anaya from the PAN party is most likely to come in second. But what is definite in all outlets is that López Obrador is scheduled to win.
I'll come to that in just a bit, but Andalusia, you mentioned Ecatepec, where you are stationed, has been one of the worst affected when it comes to crime. What has resulted in this situation there?
Yes, well, Mexico has an increasing homicide rate over every year. It's gotten worse. Last year was the worst on record. And here in Ecatepec, it's a sprawling industrial suburb. There's a lot of informal housing, and really there's not enough services for people. I mean, some people to live in shacks, other people, there's a lot of poverty, and also there's a lot of corruption in the police, and there's also not the proper budget. Often one study just came out, an investigation that was done that showed why is it so easy to murder people in Mexico, and it shows that 95% of crimes do not go prosecuted and 95% of murders. So often investigative police are overworked. They have 100 cases they're working on. They also, even those who arrive at the crime scenes don't don't even know how to properly preserve the evidence, and there's really high levels of impunity. All of these things contribute to increased violence. So when people know that they can murder and get away with it, when they could rob people and get away with it, allows them to keep doing it.
All right, Andalusia, I'll just come back to it. Let me also get in Eric onto the conversation. Eric, criminal hyper-violence, as it has been described in a dozen years, has killed more than 150,000 people and left tens of thousands missing. This year, marking the bloodiest election process in Mexico. Ahead of the elections, more than 13,000 Mexicans have been killed. What, according to you, have been the factors contributing to those statistics and overall to this being the most violent election campaign in Mexico in living memory?
Well, most of that violence is in pretty remote and rural and small towns and villages. So it's not here primarily not here in Mexico City or the big urban areas, but it's a reflection of conflict amongst local criminal organizations, the weakness of the state to hold control of those areas. And so it's, I think, in a way, a warning sign to Mexico that it has to build the government capacity prevent that from spreading and becoming more of an issue.
All right, Eric and Andalusia, I'll just come back to you both. Let's just take a closer look for a few moments at what the situation of increasing violence and escalating crime in Mexico looks like. Despite Mexico choosing for a new government, the surge in violence has not ceased. 120 people have already been killed in the run-up to those elections, and another candidate was attacked today. Sol Nava-Ostadillo, the Institutional Revolutionary Party candidate running for the post of mayor of the country's southern municipality of Tixtila, says that armed individuals carried out an attack on his home during the early morning hours. A chopper could be seen hovering over the area where the attack occurred. Despite tight security being in place, the candidates are afraid for their lives. The candidate said that he had not received threats before the attack and that he would report the facts to the state authorities so that an investigation could be launched. Mexico's 89 million eligible voters are voting to elect a successor to President Enrique Peña Nieto.
Fue agredida la propiedad en la que vivimos en mi domicilio, Martín de Armendáriz, esquina con Juan N. Álvarez, en el barrio de Santiago. Aproximadamente como a las 3 de la mañana se escucharon algunas percusiones de arma de fuego que se impactaron en la pared de la casa. Que por supuesto esos sucesos lamentables en este clima político electoral pues da mucha incertidumbre al proceso electoral que estamos viviendo aquí en el municipio de Tixtla. Lamento ese tipo de sucesos que pasen.
Eric, let me just come back to you on that. Civilians being targeted and candidates being attacked and more than 130 politicians being murdered. That figure alone should be a telltale sign of the sad state of affairs in Mexico.
Well, over a period of time, as many as 130 have been targeted, and they're primarily candidates or office holders for small mayorships, municipal presidents. They're in areas that, again, where organized crime has a great deal of control, and the state has not been able to fully recapture and maintain security in those areas.
All right, Andalusia, how have the candidates then promised to tackle the menace of crime? For example, bring us up to speed with what Obrador has promised that he will be bringing to the table to turn things around.
One of the things that he has said is try to look at innovative solutions. The previous governments have just gone to the military, putting more soldiers out on the street to play the role of police, and that's actually increased crime in many areas and increased human rights violations, both on the border in Ciudad Juarez and all over across the country. And he is the one candidate who has not gone for this militarist approach, saying that the military will solve all the problems. One of the things that he has mentioned and has actually caused a lot of controversy is amnesty for people that are low level involved in drug trafficking, mostly farmers, as Mexico is a high poppy production country, and most of the people that do produce the poppy are very poor farmers that live in very isolated areas of the country. So he has talked about possibly giving them amnesty and looking at other innovative solutions instead of just talking about a hard on crime approach of more policing and more military.
All right, clearly, Eric, there has been a failure at multiple levels. The government failing to contain the rising incidence of crime. Is the government also losing the war against drugs? And is the anger overall palpable among the voters when it comes to these issues?
Well, I mean, all levels of government have failed. In Mexico, you have 3 levels of government. You have the federal, the state, and the municipal, the local. Obviously, local law enforcement in many of these remote areas is very weak. Sometimes there's only a handful of police with not much in the way of arms and capacity to fight crime. And so they're up against well-armed, well-organized crime. Those local authorities need the support of the federal government, of the state government, and that hasn't always happened. Many times the federal government deploys the military to lower the tensions, to spread out the violence, but it doesn't reestablish the capacity of local government or state government to really control the area and create security for the citizens.